Hey everyone, welcome to Talent Talk. It's Tuesday, which means we are here with two fantastic guests to learn, to talk, to ask questions, and to hopefully learn something that we can use in our own career in a positive way. So, this is really what the show is all about, having these remarkable leaders here, talking to these very talented people about how they manage talent, what they've been seeing out there, what books are they reading, what are they thinking about, worried about, anything that we can use. And so many of their stories over the years have actually been big parts of the books that I've written, and the work that I do with companies as a consultant, and of course in my own companies that I run. So if you're interested in any of that, you can check out my first book, a bestseller called The Power of Company Culture, and then my recent book that just came out this year also hit the bestseller list, Remote Work. Go to Amazon or wherever you find books. I'm sure you'll have no trouble finding it if you found this radio show. So, as I mentioned, Talent Talk is live every Tuesday, 1 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. We love our live audience. They come in, they follow us on Twitter at PeopleG2 and ask questions and comment and really are part of the conversation. But if you're not coming in live, that's okay. You can still connect with us on Twitter. And you can also make sure you subscribe wherever you're listening to this show. If it's iTunes, iHeartRadio, Stitcher, Spotify, whatever, just subscribe. That way you make sure you always get the next episode and find out what the next amazing leader is thinking about and talking about. All right, speaking of my guest today, we will first bring in Mark Hershberg. He's the MIT instructor, author, and CTO. And then this is sort of our very technical group today. And then we're going to have in Steve Orrin. He's a federal CTO at Intel. So hopefully we won't get too technical for everybody. I think these guys are pretty adept at being able to I don't want to say dumb it down for us, but let's not take us too technical. So, but let's go ahead and bring in Mark Hershberg. Welcome to the show, sir.
Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure to be here.
Yeah, I know you're an MIT instructor, you're a CTO, you're an author as well of the Career Toolbook, Essential Skills for Success That No One Taught You. Why don't you tell everyone a little bit of what else is important for us to know about you so we can have a great conversation today?
My primary career is building typically startup companies, whether classic startups or helping Fortune 500s who want to innovate. But what I realized early in my career were that there were these other non-technical skills I needed to succeed. Yes, I knew how to program, I was pretty good at, but to be the leader I wanted to become, I had to learn leadership skills, communication, negotiation, networking. And so I've had this side career where I've been teaching now for 20 years at MIT and elsewhere, trying to help develop these professional skills in our workforce, because unfortunately, it's not normally taught at the high school or college level.
In sort of preparing for our conversation today, I was suddenly remembered an old lesson that I received. I took like an extra sort of networking course when I was actually it was after I graduated. I went back into some little like extra courses. I did one on like Windows NT or something, right? And I'm sure whatever I learned in that, I probably couldn't help me in today's technology. But I do remember my professor saying over and over and over again, whenever something wouldn't work or we couldn't figure out how to do something, he always said, always check permissions. And he was always right when it came to the problem with the technical side of it, right? There was always something not turned on, something with permissions wasn't correct, right? That was sort of stopping me. But over the years, I evolved that advice into the human side of it. When I wasn't getting the reaction from people or the buy-in from people or whatever I expected from them in behavior, I always remembered go back and check permissions. Like, do I have the permission to that with them to move forward? Do they have the permission to even say yes to me or no to me? Like, there's so much about that sort of it's a soft skill, right? And I don't know if you've sort of seen that as well.
Absolutely. Certainly, we know when negotiating, are you the person I should negotiate with, or is it your boss or someone else in the company? Am I wasting my time if you're not that right person? Or maybe you're the gatekeeper I have to get through. When it comes to networking, a common mistake is, oh, hey, Chris, I want to meet you. Nice to meet you. Can you do me this favor? Can you get me this job? Whoa, slow down. We just met.
Right.
Do we have that permission, that relationship that you're willing to open a door for me?
Right.
Even going to your earlier comment about communication, about Steve and I, not dumbing down, but how do we translate what's in our language, vocabulary, our mental models to people who don't have that? And how do all of us, no matter what our background is, we all carry a certain background and context. How do we make sure we can communicate in the context of our audience? These are all important skills that we never talk about in school.
Yeah, and I think you've landed on one of the big, maybe big two or three concepts that I think makes a great leader. They have to be able to communicate effectively and foster good communication as well amongst their organization. It's not just enough for them to do it really well if everyone else is doing it terribly, right? How else would you define good leadership?
Leadership is diverse, and we could have two people come up with completely different lists. In the book, I really focus on the fundamentals of leadership because so many people, particularly early in their career, although early can be even throughout their 20s, 30s, sometimes in their 40s, think of leadership positionally, coming
Mhm.
from you have a title, and not true influential leadership, which is what companies always want. They want people to stand up and take initiative. Now, of course, we can say, well, a leader is someone who can put forth an idea and have other people follow. But to be effective, as you're asking, there's a myriad of skills, which includes communication, includes having a strong network, knowing how to negotiate, knowing how to even manage people can help make you an effective leader, even though we typically distinguish management from leadership. So all of these skills can help support you to be more effective in your leadership. And the great thing is for developing leaders, you don't have to wait till you are standing out front as a leader to work on these skills. You can develop them even when you're not a leader. So when you do step forward, you have the skills at the ready.
Yeah, and I think one of the things I've learned over the years is that to be a good leader, often sort of the more I learn about how to be a good leader and the more I'm able to put things in practice, kind of the harder it is to do. And what I mean by that is I have found that ultimately, if I do it right, if I get everything right about leadership, then my team, the people that I'm most often interacting with, should feel like I didn't have anything to do with it. Like that they were able to be successful, get their job done, reach the goal, whatever. And that I wasn't some part of that. I mean, I was, if they really think about it, right? I'm there creating the environment in the periphery, but I'm not there doing the work, right? I'm not standing there doing the thing with them or making that thing happen right alongside them. They're able to do that themselves. And I don't know how much of that translates into what you're talking about with because there is influential versus positional leadership. It is at the high level, in your opinion, that you can really, empower people to do their best work without you being a bottleneck, I guess, in that process.
You've hit on two important points here. The first, as you noted, the more you learn, you feel it becomes even more complex. And that's because when we start out as leaders, or really with any of these skills, we have this very narrow view. Well, a leader just tells people what to do. Okay, that's easy. I'm going to tell others what to do. Then you start to realize, well, no, it's not ordering other people around. It's influencing them, it's supporting them, it's helping, it's mentoring, it's guiding, it's planning. Okay, there's a lot more to do. And so we start to say, oh, there's a whole bunch of things I have to focus on. It gets more complex. And that's why we as leaders always need to continue to learn and evolve. Now, then to your second point, what the best leaders know is leadership is not zero sum. If I am the leader in charge of the company, I don't say, well, Chris, you shouldn't be leading. That's my job. I should say, Chris, I want you to stand up and lead and stand next to me. At times, even stand in front of me
Hmm.
because we together can do more. You are not eclipsing or limiting my leadership. And good leaders know how to elevate and support other people. In my book, one of the things I teach, I put this in the management section. A good manager is a lazy manager. What do we mean? When I manage teams, every time I have to make a decision, that means I had to be there and I couldn't be doing something else. If I can empower my team to make that decision, either by giving them the authority or having a process in place to guide that decision, now I don't have to do that and I can use my time and energy to do something else that adds yet more value to the company. And so all of us as leaders and managers want to empower and help our teams and organizations and systems to really do as much as possible without us.
So if someone out there listening maybe is just starting their leadership journey or feeling like maybe their leadership journey has hit a bit of a bump in the road, is there maybe one or two qualities you think they should really focus in on to kind of jumpstart that process?
I would not say there's just one or two. And here's one of the challenges I often see in HR. HR says we want leaders, or when we're hiring, we want someone who is a leader. That can mean many things. The leader who says, I am going to grow this team or this business from a small size to medium to large, that's a different type of leadership than so you bring someone in when you have a demoralized team and say you have to reinvigorate them, or a leader who inspires, or a leader who transforms, or a leader who can bring together warring factions. They're all important types of leadership, but they are different. And any leader may not be equally strong at each of them. So it's important to say, what do we mean when we want someone to be a leader, or when you want to develop as a leader, in what way? And it might be all of them, but you're not going to do all of it at once. So what do you want? It's like, you want a basketball player. Well, someone who's a good shooter, a good defender, a good passer. What do you want? And focus on those particular skills, then move on to others.
Yeah, and then that's filling, I guess, filling in the gaps, right? If organizations can really figure out what they need, and I've seen very few be good at that. There are some, but to really understand, geez, we have a lot of extroverted, inspiring leaders, and yet we probably need some introverted, like really run the team, get things done. Doesn't need the center of attention, but it can be really results oriented, right? And that's leadership too. I think we make that big mistake that leadership is always some Hollywood version, right, of a person who's just loudmouth and overly inspiring, and just, I don't know, like you're the best coach you ever had in sports or something. Because a lot of my best leaders are quiet. They listen a lot. They really understand what's happening in the organization, and they can get things moving quickly, right, without being a loudmouth. Now, there's anything wrong with extroverts. I am one, but that's not the only leadership style, right?
This is a very important point, and I address in this section the myth of the alpha male, because we do have this Hollywood view. Think 1950s leading man stands
Right.
up, takes charge, and from just our cultural norms, this is what we're brought up seeing as a leader, and this is what many people look for as a leader. And what happens is companies, because we have this bias within us, we look for that extrovert, we look for that loud, decisive person, and we
Right.
miss out on other, at times even better leaders who have a different leadership style. So it's very important, even if you do not want to be a leader, to understand leadership, to understand the different styles and recognize what is leadership and what do you look for, so you don't follow the wrong leader.
Yeah, and I think once you have figured that out, if you have your good leadership in there, and to your point, you said maybe you don't want to be the leader. I mean, I know lots of people that say it's not what I want to do. I'm really good at what I do, but I don't necessarily need to go and lead a team as well. I can go and be the best salesperson or the best IT person, whatever, but I don't want to be in charge of everybody. So what's sort of that, I guess, relationship then between leading and following?
One of the things that is very important to understand is that leadership and management skills, in fact, all the skills in the book, negotiating, networking, communicating, these are not skills that belong to a title. These are skills that we all use every day. Because even if you don't directly manage people, well, all of us do manage people, not maybe in the hierarchy, but you and I have to work together on some project, maybe with other people. How do I convince you to do this part that I'm not as good at? Or how do we trade off? We have to maybe negotiate between us. I have to convince you that, hey, I need you to do this little extra work that you didn't think you needed to do for the project. Those are some management techniques, even if I am not formally managing you. And then, of course, the leadership piece, because it's not positional, it's standing up and saying, hey, everyone, wait a second, I have an idea and I want to convince you all of it. So all of these skills are skills that each of us need, no matter where we are in the hierarchy. And even if you never want that leadership or management title, investing in these skills are going to make you more effective as an individual contributor.
Yeah. Well, one of the things that I loved in your book that you wrote about was that this idea that people can practice leadership, and I think you said practice it every day. And this is a concept that has, I don't know, I don't understand why we don't do more of this, because at least as Americans, as the average American has played some sport, right? Even as a child, you might have done 1 year of soccer or baseball or something. Like you understand this concept of We go and we practice. And in fact, with sports, we practice 99% of the time. And we only really go and execute in a real competitive situation 1% of the time. Even our PE in school, it's just practicing, right? We do all this practice. In school, it's practice before we actually take a test. And yet we come to work and it's nope, we are in full game mode and there is no practice anymore. So how do people put this in place? Where can they find that good practice so they can be better leaders?
There are lots of things you can do to practice your leadership, practice your negotiations, practice these skills. But let's look at a very simple, lightweight one that any company can implement for all their employees. What you want to do is create peer learning groups. Too much of our training is either none at all, or, oh, Chris, you're a rising star, so we're going to send you to a 2-day seminar, you and a few other lucky winners. Go do it, come back, now you're ordained as a leader, right? Because in 2 days, clearly you learned everything. Instead, we want to create these small peer learning groups, and you can create groups as small as 6 or 8 people. There are also ways to scale it to larger groups. What you want to do is have folks read some content together. And yes, you can do it with my book. You can do it with any other book, content online, even listen to great podcasts like this one. And each week, have them listen to that content, get that content, and then together have a discussion about it. Because as much as we want everyone to stand up and lead, you can't always create that circumstance where, okay, Chris, we're giving you a chance to lead now. But what we can do is, as we sit around, talk about leadership circumstances, ones from your past, from my past, a circumstance I'm facing right now, and I can get your input on it. And as we discuss this will help us learn and formulate our understanding. This, by the way, is how we teach at MIT, and this is how top business schools teach it. So this is a proven method that companies can implement for effectively little or no money.
Right. And it's just so important. We have like very specific meetings we do like once a month where we practice meeting and we practice disagreeing and and it's like, it amazes me how if we don't do that every month, we sort of lose a little of that psychological safety. We lose a little bit of that edge, our ability to really then, it sort of sets us up for the rest of the month to be able to be really open and honest and have good disagreements, right? To have a, you don't, I was worried in a meeting if everyone agrees and everyone just thinks what I said was correct. I'm like, oh, there's something going on here. This is not good. Like someone needs to disagree with me in order to feel better about, whatever my idea was. So
here's how we should think about it. When I teach negotiations, I give the example, imagine you're a 25-year-old, you have this job opportunity for $60,000, but because you learned a little about negotiations, you negotiate $1,000 more. So you get $61,000. If you do nothing else in your career, you just got $1,000 more for the next 40 years. That one tiny negotiation, this isn't solving world peace, tiny negotiation that took 5 minutes, gets you $40,000. And of course, we know you're not going to sit in that job for 40 years. You'll have promotions, raises, other jobs. Learning to negotiate can add tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands of dollars to your bottom line. Now, let's think about this generally. With leadership, no one's going to say you're a better leader, here's $1,000 more, but it's going to open up opportunities for you. You're going to get better opportunities, you're going to get better jobs, better promotions. All of these skills, if you just get a tiny bit better, it adds up, right? You get this massive compounding effect. If in an organization, everyone in your company got 2% better at communicating, what would that do to your bottom line? So it's not about trying to take a few people and make them superstars, just elevating everyone a tiny amount on these skills, which is really easy considering the baseline we're coming from, has a massive ROI on your company's effectiveness.
And I love the $40,000 example. And I would even argue that there's probably more money and value to you hidden in there, because the crazy part about the psychology of negotiation is that people want to negotiate. So if you don't settle for that initial offer and you negotiate yourself for something, they feel like the people you're negotiating with feel like they got a better deal a better employee because you advocated for yourself, you negotiated, and they think, well, that person's going to go do that for me every day inside the company. Whereas if I took the first offer right away, they might go, geez, did I offer too much? Is this person desperate? Did they just, did I hire the right person? And now there's doubt, right? And you can't ever undo that. That psychology always fascinates me.
And you hit upon a deeper part of this, because sometimes HR will say, wait, I'm teaching my employees to negotiate better. They're all going to ask for more money. Well, yes, but first of all, they're going to get more money from your partners, from your customers, from your suppliers.
Mm-hmm.
But also the people we negotiate most often with tend to be our coworkers. And so learning to negotiate better with our coworkers just makes us overall much more effective and creates better outcomes within the organization.
Well, Mark, we're almost out of time here. I want to ask two quick questions. First, is there a book that you're reading right now, or a resource or something that you think our listeners should check out?
I just read my friend Charles Vogel's The Storytelling for Leadership, which I think is a great book. And I list a number of fantastic books on my website. Some that I reference, others are just good general resources.
Well, that's the second question, is how can people find out more about you? What's your website, or where should they go to find out more?
You can go to my website, thecareertoolkitbook.com. You can get in touch with me or follow me online. You can download the free companion app for the book, which is available from Apple and Android and linked from the website. There's a whole resources page where I list these other books. I have a free download, how you can create these learning groups within your company. All these resources and everything else on my website, thecareertoolkitbook.com.
Well, Mark, you've been a spectacular guest today. I know we had tons more to get to, so hopefully we can have you come back at some point and we can dive in deeper and you can give us an update on the amazing stuff that you're doing. But thank you again so much for being on the show today.
Thank you for having me. I've enjoyed it.
All right, we'll be right back after this quick commercial break and bring in my second guest, Steve Orrin.
Imagine buying a newspaper. The news you're reading is 6 months old. There isn't much that stays the same for 6 months. And the same thing goes for background checks. In a time when so much outdated information is being passed around, it's good to know that People G2 offers something different. At People G2, we provide today's intelligence, not yesterday's news. Our value-added approach offers you a fully FCRA-compliant solution that includes up-to-the-minute information. By combining industry-leading technology with old-school human investigation, People G2 is able to give you information that is accurate right now, delivered quickly through our online system, or integrated with your HR system. So ask yourself, are you comfortable working with old news, or are you ready for a different kind
Steve,
of
go ahead and talk real quick.
company?
Testing 1, 2, 3.
Visit peopleg2.com or call 800-630-2880. That's 800-630-2880. or peopleg2.com.
Welcome back to the Talent Talk radio show. Don't forget, you can connect with us on social media. You can follow us on Twitter at PeopleG2 and be a part of the conversation right now. If you'd like to follow along with the live tweeting, or maybe if you're listening after the fact, you can even comment there as well. You can certainly keep track of us at talenttalkradio.com or wherever you find our podcasts, iTunes, iHeartRadio, Stitcher, Spotify. There's a gazillion of them out there. Just pick one and subscribe, and then you'll never miss another episode. All right, we're going to go ahead and bring in my second guest, Steve Orrin. He is the federal CTO at Intel. Steve, welcome to the show today.
Thank you. Good to be here, Chris.
Why don't you tell them a little bit about yourself, what you do, what's important for us to know about our conversation, about you for our conversation today?
Sure. And so, as mentioned, I'm the federal CTO or Chief Technology Officer for Intel Corporation. And in that role, it's my job to help the federal government understand both today and the future technology and architecture that Intel and its ecosystem brings to bear, as well as take the input from the federal government across civilian, military, and intelligence and its ecosystem back inside Intel so they can better understand the needs, use cases, and requirements, and really help drive solutions and architectures that solve those mission and enterprise style needs.
Well, that sounds like an amazing opportunity to really do some cool stuff. I mean, I could say that sounds like a really tough job, and I could say that sounds like an overwhelming challenge, but I think it kind of sounds exciting. I mean, you have ability to impact the lives of hundreds of millions of people, right? By helping the government get it just a little bit better. It's a little bit right?
Absolutely. It is truly, and it does cover just about every kind of use case, from citizen services to scale platforms and everything in between. So it's never a dull moment.
Right. Well, I guess that's a good way to work. It's never a dull moment. So, what really drives you then to innovate? You have a lot of probably different stakeholders. You have lots of different initiatives, things that are going on. How do you sort of focus then on, I guess, that innovative part?
Well, for me, it really comes down to a couple of fundamental things. For me, what really excites me about innovations is being able to solve problems, and the challenge of being able to tackle those hard problems. And they don't always have to be the big, hairy problems, boil the ocean, big human problems. Sometimes it's the small problems that are just a little bit of innovation provides that efficiency that actually gets things done. And so really, it's about coming up with those approaches. And for me, throughout my career, oftentimes it's coming out with those, what they call the outside the box style approaches, coming at the problem from a different angle, and finding solutions, finding ways of doing things or building new technologies or new approaches that ultimately have impact. Like you mentioned, the thing that really excites me about this job and about my previous roles is about being able to impact on the market or impact on people's lives. When you make the IRS more efficient, that means taxes get returned faster. When you make the Department of Transportation better, it means bridges get built better. Everything gets better if you can help them solve their big enterprise and mission challenges. And it goes across all aspects of government. And then the other key thing is that what you can do for the government, which is sometimes a vanguard of the broader industry, what works for them will be needed by other industries. They have a lot of the other industries, whether it be regulated industries like financial services or healthcare or industrial, have many of the same use cases and can leverage those innovations that we build for government to really spawn new capabilities out into the broader marketplace.
One of the challenges I think I've seen for the IT department or for anyone who's maybe trying to help an organization or a company solve is that, there's a lot that gets lost. It's like the old telephone game, right? In school, where the first thing said is not the last thing that somebody hears. And so you can easily go back and create the perfect solution and it ends up not even addressing the original problem, right? So you need really, really great people, engineers and architects, and people who can really understand what is needed. And so how do you find those people? Because that feels like I don't want to say a needle in a haystack, but certainly, they're not growing on trees, right? I mean,
So there are a couple things you look for there, Chris. You want to find independent thinkers, ones that are going to sort of take ownership and go try things. But you want those independent thinkers working together across different domains of expertise. You want them to know something really, really well. But with that is also the willingness to learn. I found some of the best innovators may be an expert in one field, but they're also open to learning about new things and then taking their experiences and applying them to other places. And that's where innovation happens. A lot of times it's coming at a problem from a completely different domain or a completely different set of experiences that sees, oh, well, you've been doing it this way because that's how you've been taught to do it. There's another way because I've seen it work over here. And so that willingness to learn and willingness to take risks. And you're right, they're few and far between, but when you are looking for those things, then you identify them and then you foster those people. You grow those people, you enable those people. And they will bring along and help mentor the next generation. And so I think it's finding those unique individuals, but then helping them create their, cloning themselves amongst their peer set and amongst the next generation.
Yeah, and I think you kind of really hit on something that we have heard over and over and over again in the hundreds of interviews we've done on this show is that we're looking for lifelong learners. We're looking for people who want to continue to learn, and we're looking for people who are curious, right? To your point, they may have had all the education and all the experience in this one area, but can still be totally curious about something new and be able to take some of that energy and put it into a new place. And I guess I wonder why do some people not have that? I'm not sure, where does that sort of get stifled or destroyed? But it does seem to be the hallmark, the cornerstone of these top performing people that a lot of our guests seem to talk about. Do you have any ideas on maybe why this sort of gets lost for some people?
I think there could be a couple of reasons. People could get stuck in doing what they call the development rut, where they're doing a lot of the same things over and over and aren't sparked with that opportunity to innovate. I can tell you that it doesn't mean, just because someone currently isn't an independent thing, doesn't mean they can't get there. A lot of times it's about pairing them and giving them what I call the air cover. to go off and try things without being held to. A lot of people, especially in the development environment, classic development environment, you're held to a very tight schedule. You have to produce this many lines of code or this many modules to meet the functional requirements in a given time. That doesn't leave a whole lot of room for innovation unless you're trying to fix a bug. And so being able to help pair them with some of those existing innovative thinkers, but also give them tasks that aren't, go build me this module, but try to figure out a way to make the module more efficient, or what are other ways we could architect this. Give them some opportunity to think differently without any consequences to the schedule. And that's part of how you enable people to start changing and getting out of those ruts, I would think.
And then I think the next part would have to be, now that you've identified these great people, now you have, 2, 3, 4, whatever the number of people is that you need to really excel. Then how do you have a good team, right? I mean, this is something we see in sports all the time. You can have 5 of the best all-stars together and they could be terrible, right? Because they don't know how to share the ball, or they're too one-sided in particular skill sets. So how do you then sort of transfer them into being an innovative team?
That's a really interesting question. Part of what makes innovation teams successful is being able to enable them to do that innovation. The way I like to talk about it is you point them in the right direction, you get out of the way and provide the right air cover. And so how you enable them to operate is that you get those independent thinkers, those innovators, give them a juicy problem, point them at the area that they need to go focus, and then let them do. Don't micromanage them. But you want to provide that air cover so that they can go off and try things without having to worry about someone staring over them or product deadlines that would trump innovation. But one of the things that I find, and this is after years and years of looking at various different innovation teams I've had, the most successful ones are highly diverse teams. And it's not only the diversity that we talk about a lot today of having, sort of multiple ethnic and gender backgrounds on the same, because the people think differently, have different experiences, but also diversity of experience, diversity of backgrounds, diversity of domains. If you're doing, security solutions, having security experts, but also having enterprise experts, having cloud experts, having firmware experts that maybe don't know anything about security, but understand the different aspects of the problem and can come at it from new ways. And then the other thing is having, some of those, rock star point guards and having defensive players. So you want to have a mix. People who know how to pump out code really fast and be able to build solid, efficient, not buggy code, and people who probably build horrible code, but they do some really cool things. You marry those together, and the cross-pollination. I think one of my favorite examples is early in my career, I was building a mainframe security company. And so we had some crypto engineers who were so young and understand all the math and cryptography. And then we had some mainframe engineers that had been working in the industry for 30 years, had been working on mainframes since the 60s. And we married them together. And what came from that was both sides pollinating each other. And I think that's the kind of thing you get with diverse teams, is both sides, everyone raises everyone else's boat.
Yeah, and that's a really amazing kind of way to think about it. And we've seen this in so many different aspects. I mean, we saw that early on when millennials were coming into the workforce, that they were being paired up, right, with more senior people to teach them how to use all these different technologies and to understand what social meant. And so it was a way to take, and then at the same time, those millennials were saying, I was getting this incredible mentoring about my career and how to be a leader. And so by bringing them together and allowing them that cross-pollination, I guess, was really, really important, as opposed to, I guess, send them all independently to some training to deal with their weakness or where they have a gap in their stuff, right? Let them work together.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Yeah. So you find the right people, you get your team going, and I'm imagining the next challenge might be, well, how does that work and scale, right? Now you start getting all these projects, all these things coming in. So how do you manage that part of it?
So there are a couple of ways to come at the scaling problem, and really, how do you make successful innovation happen? Part one is map to real problems. So make sure that there's something substantial. So when they do have an answer, when they do come up with a solution, it makes an impact, whether it be to the organization, to the customer, to your partners. Make sure there's a mapping to real problems. And one of the things I've learned, and a lot of folks, both in big companies and small companies, forget to do this, is you make sure from the get-go you have what we call a diffusion plan. So you're going to go off and try something, you're going to innovate, you're going to come up with a product, a demo or proof of concept, a prototype, and you're going to show, hey, it gets the job done, it solves the problem, it gives you 50% better performance, whatever the thing is. You have to have already thought about what's next? How are you going to get it into the hands of real customers? How are you going to sell it? Whatever that diffusion from the innovation team to the real world. What is the mechanism? You don't have to have it all figured out, but you have to have a plan. You have to know who the key stakeholders are that would take it from you to mature it, because most innovation teams are just that. They're good at doing rapid innovation, but they're not necessarily the team you'd want to go productize something and be able to build it something that could run on 40 million laptops. And so having a plan for how you then transfer the technology, transfer the innovation to a more of a production scale. Along with that, though, is I think one of the other key things is getting stakeholder buy-in and education early. When I've seen a lot of these, especially in government and in large organizations, they build these little innovation cells, and they keep them so far away from the rest of the business so that no one can bother them, that they get disconnected from the business. And when they come up with something, the business owners either get a not invented here syndrome, or they are like, well, this doesn't really apply to what I'm doing. One of the real keys to success is getting those stakeholders bought in from the get-go, by both providing, here are my big challenges to go solve, but then also having some of their people involved in the design, so that they are learning of what's being innovated, makes it easy for them to consume it once the innovation process is done. And then the last one I'm sure you've heard from lots of people, but I can't stress enough, is reward trying things. What that means is failure is good. Right. They talk about fail fast, fail often, fail forward, but at the end of the day, one of the key things that has to change at a corporate or institutional level is to understand that you learn from your failures. And so if you fail 100 times, getting to the 101st, those failures are not failures. They're actually really good learning about how to do things different ways. And I've seen examples where the 51st failure, while it didn't solve the problem, when we go to the next innovation, they learned something on the last one that then they applied from that last one. Well, it didn't work here, but it does work there. And so I think institutionally rewarding failure, rewarding trying things is the way I like to say it, is an absolutely important thing to do.
Yeah, and it makes perfect sense when you're inventing, when you're creating, and I think people intuitively understand that us trying things and making mistakes, and that those things can be great learnings. I think what the challenges is for people maybe who are in jobs where that's not the first part of what they're doing, then we see organizations really stifle them around trying new things and all of that. Because I mean, it makes sense. I mean, how do we get a really crappy glue that we end up putting on the back of a Post-it? It was a totally huge mistake. It was a gigantic failure in making a glue, and if they hadn't documented that at 3M, that wouldn't have been discovered years later when some guy wanted to post his choir song sheet on a piece of on a like a bracket, right? And so, but if you didn't track it, if you didn't reward, if you didn't think about how does this happen, but I always want to challenge organizations to think about it, not just in the context that you described it, but across the organization as a whole, because it's important everywhere.
Absolutely. That's a really good point.
Yeah. Now, the other thing I'm wondering is, you see, you guys are probably getting thrown all sorts of different challenges, especially during COVID. You maybe had some things you never thought you'd get, but you can't always be just, going out and trying to grab someone from some other organization. And you can't always rely on just being able to pick up someone who just came out of school. So at what level are you, does Intel, and are you fostering sort of this entrepreneurship, right? Where you're trying to get people to develop internally, to take on new projects or do things where you can maybe level them up over time?
So there are a couple ways to come at that. And I think I'll give you a couple examples that we've done and that we've done over my career and I've seen successfully implemented in other organizations. First and foremost, you have to build it in. If you want to be able to foster an innovation, there's a famous example of Google having the 10% rule, where 10% of your time could be on whatever fun projects you want. But if you think about it more on the innovation and entrepreneurship, is giving people built in the time to go try things and to be able to innovate on various different spaces. The other thing, and the thing that Intel does very well is, and whether you call it creating the Tiger team environment or the incubation cells, is you rotate engineers and rotate managers and product managers into Tiger teams, where we're going to go solve some big problem. We're going to go make the design process faster. We're going to go try to do AI for something interesting. And you build a Tiger team and bring the diverse group together, task them and give them ownership. And I think that's the foundational thing. Where you see real innovation happen is when you give a team a project and they get to own it. And they get to drive it and they get the credit for it when it is successful. And they get the credit for the trying and the learnings they've done. And the process there is, again, you're not going to be able to pull and create a full-time incubation cell or an innovation cell in large organizations, especially when you have, rapid product deadlines. But you build these sort of tiger teams that people can rotate into, and that they can spend 6 months, sort of learning how to do something different, and then bring that back to their teams. And what I found really successful, I mean, obviously the tiger team itself went off and did some really cool things, but then those people go back to their business units, recharged, refreshed, with the knowledge of, hey, we just did this really cool thing with AI. Let me tell you about how to use AI. And let me tell you how we did this cool thing. And so you're sort of creating that viral approach of bringing engineers in, training them on these cool technology, giving them the opportunities. And then they go back to their business units and they pollinate for you.
Yeah. Well, and this is really phenomenal, because I love both what you're saying, but I also wanted to just make a quick note. So years ago, my co-author and I developed this idea of the Tiger Team, and we have had it in organizations, and I don't know how it floated around the universe, but now you're back telling me about a Tiger Team, and I'm like, this is the most amazing day ever, because we just gave it a funny name because we wanted people to remember it, and here it's gone around the world. So that was pretty fun to hear. So I really appreciate it.
Oh, my pleasure. That's awesome.
Well, how have things been different for you guys with COVID, especially, around internal innovation? I'm really fascinated to know if you saw a difference with people being remote versus maybe how they were traditionally working. How has that sort of looked for you guys?
That's a very interesting one. COVID threw some really unique challenges. And in the innovation world, we saw in the very early days a lot of rapid innovation, because suddenly you had to get your remote workforce up and running. You had to be able to give them services, get people meeting. In weeks, you had to be able to change the way organizations run. And especially when you talk about government customers that are used to working in buildings, oftentimes with no windows and secured facilities, how do you enable a workforce that's remote? And so there was a lot of rapid innovation early on to be able to get people, and even the companies or the organizations that had like a 10% remote workforce, to move to a 90%, 100% remote required massive innovations in scaling, the services offering, security, collaboration, figuring out what's the right combination of Zoom and WebEx and Teams and what to do. We saw some amazing innovation at the Air Force, as an example, where they took some work that they've been doing on being able to do secure client systems out in the field, and rapidly innovated into a box where they could enable a large, we're talking over 100,000 of their Air Force employees and servicemen and women to be able to work remotely in a secure fashion with classified information. And so being able to enable them to go fully remote while still being able to do the business of the Air Force, which it requires a level of security that you don't typically find, at your house with, 12 kids running around on the Wi-Fi network. Those were some of the major innovations that had to happen early. I think we'll see a new wave of innovation probably starting in the fall, going into the next year, looking at how do we address the new normal. What is that? What stuff are we going to, okay, we got to stop doing that. But there's a lot we learned as part of this transition to remote worker, and the teaming and collaboration that had to happen, the type of cloud services that people started to adopt. It's not all going to get thrown away. And so I think we're going to see some innovations about what is that new normal and how do we enable it. The downside is, at least for me, a lot of the really best innovations happen with a group of people in a room with a whiteboard. And as good as you can try to make that in a virtual meeting, you just don't have the same experience of sitting on a whiteboard, coming up with something, and then having someone come and erase that and say, no, that's wrong, you do it this way. So I think that was one of the harder parts for innovation teams in the COVID world, was that team collaboration. I've seen some amazing technologies that were probably, it's just little demos that suddenly got some funding, and Mural and others, where they'd come up with mechanisms to try to enable that whiteboard experience for team collaboration. And we got some effective meetings out of that. But I think that the return to work, we're going to see a lot more innovation back going onto the whiteboard again.
Yeah, and it's funny because I realized it. So we're 100% remote, and we do very, very little ever together. But when we are together, it's not that someone can go up and erase on the whiteboard. It's that I can see their full body and I can get all the body language. And so we did find that for certain teams, it was important for us to get together once a year, twice a year, maybe a quarterly, just to have that insight, right? Because we could get almost everything done all the time, 100% remote, but it was important sometimes to to see someone crossing their legs and their arms as you were telling them this idea, right? And you're like, maybe you're not quite on board. I can see that.
It's interesting. There were a bunch of startups that came out over the last year that are using various different visual AIs to try to detect those sentiment, to be able to see the micro expressions and be able to give you indicators. You're losing your audience. You've got your audience. They love the joke. Things like so. There's actually a whole bunch of AIs that startups specific looking at that problem in a virtual environment.
That's very cool. There's just some amazing things. So if you ever hear any of those, please let me know. I'd love to have them on the show. I'd love to dive into what the Air Force did. That sounds amazing. We were really surprised when we were working on the book that we released this year about remote work, that we found that the United States Marine Corps was actually the most effective trainers amongst any organization in training people remotely to be ready to do a job. And so we did a huge case study on them because it was a shock to me. I thought it would be someone like Google or somebody you would naturally think of, right? No, here it is, the United States Marine Corps, that they train people so well that they can suddenly be put together and then execute perfectly on a mission or initiative and get it done to a degree. Because it's life and death, right? It's not just, well, did this service work well, or did this website look nice? I guess it made the stakes are a little higher, but anyways, it's fascinating.
I'm sure it was. I look forward to reading that because I think the Marine Corps does have, they are very effective of how they communicate, how they package up what needs to get. And they're very mission focused. And so I could see them transitioning to another mechanism like virtual and being able to just cut and paste and do. Because when you put a Marine on a problem, they will go solve it.
Yeah. They do have a highly motivated, very high achieving workforce too, as well. So that's certainly helping. Well, we're almost out of time here. I want to make sure we ask our final two important questions. And the first is there a book that you're reading or you tend to suggest people check out?
So I will give you I'm currently reading the latest book by Bruce Schneier called Click Here to Kill Everybody. Bruce Schneier is a longtime writer in the security and both on the politics and on the technology side. And his latest book I've just started reading is sort of looking at the world of the truly interconnected nature of all of our infrastructure and what that means. The book I recommend to all of my teams to read and all of the people I mentor is a classic that was really useful to me early in my career, Jim Collins' Good to Great. That one affected the way I ran startups. It affects the way I do teams now. It just still resonates with me.
You got to have that BHAG or else you don't know where you're going, right? Got to have it.
Exactly.
All right. Well, most important question, how can people find out more about you, learn more about your work if they're interested in doing that or reaching out? What's the best way for them to find out more about you?
The best way to find me is on LinkedIn. It's LinkedIn/S Orrin, ORRIN. That is the best way to reach out to me, and just do a connect. I'll be happy to respond.
Steve, thank you so much for being a part of the show today and sharing so much about what you're working on. Sounds like you have your hands full, but you're making a big difference for all of us here in helping the government be a little bit more efficient. So thank you so much, sir.
Thank you, Chris. It was a pleasure being here today.
All right. Thanks, everyone, for listening to today's show. Hopefully you've gained something you can use in your own career in a positive way. Until next time, do what you love and show the world how talented you can be today.